This is a request to do a learning moment on cascading filters or cascading drop-down lists, whichever way you want to think of it. Very common thing we see, for example, pick a make for cars, then you get a drop-down list of models, filtered for that make, and it can keep on going. Then once you pick a model, a trim level, et cetera, right? Very common UI design to use in web interfaces, and typically usually done with an AJAX call. Well, guess what? We've already done AJAX calls before, so really it's just a matter of setting up a JSON result action in a controller that can accept the filter value, and boom, away we go. So let's just go through a demo, though. I'm going to start off with a simple demo. What I thought of using, just because I found some seed data lying around, was province city. So a typical one-to-many. But I'll just mention, if you have a one-to-many, then it's a whole chain, right? So if you had country has many provinces, province has many cities, city has many streets, you could do this all the way down through. It's exactly the same process repeating at each relationship, right? But we're just going to do the one. So what I have is our latest version of Visual Studio open. And I'm just going to create these two new models that I need. Obviously, we have to have data to work with to make this go. So I'll add a class for province, and we'll add one for city. Okay, now these don't at this point or won't relate to anything in the actual model, any of the rest of the other models that we have, classes, but we're just going to focus on them first of all. Later on, we'll actually tie this into the overall project. But we'll do it a step at a time here, keeping it simple. So I just have a integer primary key. I have a code, a two-digit code, sorry, two-letter code, I should say. Notice we're using uppercase letters only. And then we have a name for the province. So we have the full name as well as the two-letter code. And of course, the collection as the parent has a collection of the child, right? So in the child side, we'll just go ahead and add this. Quite similar, right? We have our integer primary key. I have my, don't have a code, I just have the name for the city. And then I did throw in this summary property here. So this is depending on having the actual province available, but pretty much always I'm just going to make sure I do if I do an include for the city, I'll include the province as well. And that gives me the code so I can put this nicely together as a summary property, right? And of course, we need our foreign key, right? So it's our province ID. Notice it's not nullable. We have to have a province defined for the city, and we have a classic one-to-many relationship, right? And it's required, so we have a message there to provide to the user interface. Okay, now we're probably not even going to get to the point of actually maintaining our list of provinces and cities. We're just going to use it at this point in time. So the next thing I probably want to add is the DB sets and so on. So let's come to our context, right? And I'll have to add my two DB sets for our new entities here. So DB set of provinces, cities, right? I love the pluralization help you get from Visual Studio nowadays. And of course, one of the things that is typically done, and we should do it here as well, is for any city, you can have cities with the same name, right, in any database. I know of a little hamlet in Prince Edward Island called Toronto, believe it or not, right? But what it does is it prompts us to think about, well, perhaps a unique combination would be better to be the combination of the name of the city and the province it's in, right? So yeah, we can have Toronto in PEI and we can have a Toronto in Ontario, and that's fine, right? But we can't have two cities called Toronto in the same province. So this composite unique index here takes care of that. And the last thing we should think about, just because it is a one-to-many, is do we want to allow cascade delete, the default? And no, we probably wouldn't. We probably wouldn't want to delete a province if we have any cities in the system relating back to that province. So we'll just add our little restriction here for the delete behavior on the province to cities relationship. Okay, we've done that a million times before, so I'm not going to spend much more on that, right? Those are the two changes we'll make here in the Fluent API, as well as adding the DB sets. Now we need some seed data, right? Otherwise, otherwise I got to make a controller so I can add these I don't want to do that, so I'll just come down here into seed data, and I've just got a couple of groupings here of provinces first and then cities. So I'm going to add all this right near the top, okay? At this point, it doesn't matter where it happens, but later on, I do plan on tying this into one of the other entities in our overall model. So I'll make sure that these are all populated first so I can use them anywhere that I want later on. Okay, so it's just a simple question. Do we have any provinces already? If not, here's the data for our provinces, right? Just using, creating a collection, a list of province objects and using add range to add them all to the provinces DB set. Same idea for city. Notice we're using a link query here to get the actual IDs. I could have probably guessed that they were 1, 2, 3, 4 or whatever, right? But it's good practice to actually pull the proper data out. So we just give the name and the foreign key value, right? Foreign key is required, so we have to give that. Bada bing, and we're done. So that's our seed data. Shouldn't be too much more to worry about there. Now, what we're going to do next, of course, is we have to delete the migration, right? So I'm going to come up here to our medical office migrations. We'll just delete that folder, and I'm going to delete the database itself. And we're ready to make a new one. Now, I threw up a little bit of an extra copy paste file and get my common commands open first of all. We are going to execute this first command no matter what, but then I'm going to show you a little bit of a, well, maybe it's a trick. I don't know if you want to call it that or not. All right, come down here to our package manager console. And there is our add migration command that we normally use over and over again, right? One of the drawbacks of SQLite is we can only have a single migration at a time. So we're almost not really even using the migration principle here, but hey, it gets the job done, and it means we could switch back easily to SQL, which is something we're going to do in a learning moment coming up soon. Okay, now the issue is, as we've talked about in the past, right, we have this, okay? We have to create our triggers here. Now, I only have the one entity, patient, right, that we're actually doing concurrency control on. So we have to create these triggers manually. But it's a bit of a pain copying this. And, picture another situation where maybe in your particular project, you might have a half dozen or more tables that you're actually doing concurrency control on. Well, that's a lot of copying and pasting all this code in every time. So let's look at another thing we could do. Going back to Blackboard, I did put up here this little extra migration steps. Okay, mainly it's good for triggers. So what we're going to do is I'm going to add in the data folder a new class, right? I'm going to call it extra migration, right? I'm going to put that right in the root of the data folder. Add class called extra migration. And then coming back to Blackboard here, basically, the namespace is right. So I'm just going to replace it. Now I'm going to set it up as a static with a simple static method as well. Right, so let's bring that back into here. And I'll have to add a using, okay, for the migration builder. All right, so there we go. So this has the code. And the idea is if you had a whole bunch of code that you're actually writing SQL, creating triggers is the most common thing. But later on, there might be other things that you want to do that are hard to do without actually specifying some SQL code. Well, if I want this to run in my migration, all I have to do is put it in here and call it once. So that's kind of the beauty of this, is maybe what I'm even going to do is I'm going to throw this class into my copy paste file there, my common commands, right? Even though I shouldn't have to put it here ever again, right? There we go. And then the other thing we're going to do is, this is the only thing we have to, I'll never have to touch this again now unless we add more. So all we have to do is call this, right? We just have to call this inside our migration. So we do have to still manually update something inside the migration. Add to the migration. Okay, so that's what we actually add, right? So here, coming back, now where do you put it? Well, really, the only thing is it has to go after the table's been created. So there's nothing that it no reason it has to be before anything. It just has to be after that. So as you know, what I often do is I'll come down here, collapse the up, put my insertion point right in front of the down. Then when I expand this again, I can just use the arrow keys on the keyboard, go up a couple times, and there I am, right? I'm right at the very end of the first section of the migration, the up, right? So here I can just put my call, right? And I'm guaranteed that this will happen after any of the other work is done, which is perfectly fine for the kind of SQL I'm going to do, right? So that's it. So going forward in future, when I add a new migration, I don't have to worry about this. I don't even have to look at it, okay, unless I need to add something else into the extra migration steps I want to carry out, right? All I do is I add this one line of code into the actual migration. So yeah, I don't know. It's a little bit of a savings. There's less chance of messing up my copy paste work and so on and so forth. All right. So I'm just going to close all that now. So that will actually do that. I could do an update database. Pardon me. And we'll just make sure that everything goes smoothly now. Okay, and it'll seed next time I run. So I'm happy with that. All right. So moving forward then, let's actually, I don't know, maybe you would prefer to see this done in a totally separate controller. So I'm going to play around with that for a second here. Yes, I'm going to vary it a little bit from how it's written up in my copy paste file because I just want it to be as clean and simple to see the first time we do a quick demo here. And I looked around, and the page that has the least amount of clutter is the privacy page on the in the home views for the home controller, right? There's almost nothing on it. The home controller itself is extremely simple. So, I'm going to vary it a little bit, and we're going to do this one first. So, basically, what we need then is the home controller. Now, the thing about the home controller is right now it does not actually even access, okay, we don't use dependency injection to give us access to the actual context, right? Our DB context. So, if I open another one for now, in fact, the truth is, though, when I looked at this carefully, it was the About page made use of this logger, and I took the About out because we weren't going to use it, and so we really shouldn't have bothered with this logger anyway, right? So I could have just added the medical office context to it, um, and that would have been fine. But we can simply uh, make an adjustment for it. Maybe if just to show you how you would do this if you still needed the logger, right? I'll just add that, and we just do a comma and throw in our medical office context. Bring that in here so we can go to the bookshelf and say, oh, while you're at it, also give me this, please, from dependency injection. Okay, it's sitting there as one of the services available on our in our startup.cs on the bookshelf, right? Okay, so now we have both. Now, technically, though, I really don't need both, so I'm not using the logger. So for now, I'm even going to clean things up a bit, take that right out of the picture. And then now, of course, you'll see that the top section here looks very much identical almost to the doctor's controller. It's just the name of the controller has changed. Okay. All right. Anyway, that's good. So now we have access in the home controller to our context. Now, there's no doubt I'll be missing some usings, but those will get added in as I require access to doing stuff with our DB sets themselves. So following the instructions, though, what we need to do is get some basics. We have seed data there. We have our new model classes. But we're going to add, if we want to show these cascading drop-down lists, right, then I need some select lists in order to populate the data for them. So maybe I'm going to come down here, make a bit of white space. First one I'll throw in is the province select list. And this is just written the same way we've always done this, right? I have a nullable integer, so if I do want to pre-select something out of the list, right, that's just the way we normally do it. Other than that, it's just context provinces, order by name, and away we go. The next one, this one's a little more tricky, is the city, because we do want to filter, right? So for the city select list, I'm going to pass in, of course, the selected in case I do want to pre-select one out of the list, but here's our province ID, right? So I've laid this out in the normal way we've been adding filtering in all of our controllers. We start by defining a iQueryable, right, of cities. And then if province ID has value, well, then go ahead. We'll add that filter so we just get cities in the one province, right? And then the order by, well, that comes right as we build the select list. I can just add the order by right here, okay, showing the ID. And notice that up here, I did make sure that we included the province. That way my city province summary property will be fully complete, name of the city, comma, space, and the 2-letter code of the province, right? If I didn't include it, then I couldn't use this summary property. All right, so that's basically just a slight variation of what we've done before, but we're applying the same approach to filtering that we've used many, many times already. Now, obviously, when I first load the page, I'm going to want to populate these drop-down lists, right? So there's really nothing to pass at that stage, right? It's not even related to any object, so there's no point in trying to do so. So I'll just pass nulls there for all those parameters. Last but not least, right, is our actual method we're going to call from the client side. Okay, it returns our JSON result. Get cities. Okay, we just pass in the ID. Now in this case, this is actually province ID, right? And then that's what we pass when we call city with select, right? We pass that value to the province ID, and I'm not going to try to pre-select anything at this stage, so just simply a null for the selected ID. So this is the one we're actually going to be calling from the client. This is used when the page first loads to get the data in the drop-down list, but when we want to refresh the city list based on the selected province, we're going to be calling this get cities from the client side. All right, so let's go to the client side. So that's just our view, right? Now I could put some nice formatting and so on in here, but I'm not going to bother. We're just going to stick these form elements exactly the same way I would normally have them on any of our other views. There's going to be full width of the screen because I don't have any row defined, any columns defined or anything. They're just going to basically be right there, right across the screen. But what do we have? Well, we have a label saying province and a select control, right? Now notice this is not, there's no model on this page, so I can't use ASP4, right? It's not a property that belongs to the model. It's not a bound property, so to speak. So I normally then would give it identical ID and name values. That's what we would typically do. It can get its data. The ASP items can come from our view data, and that's exactly what we're doing. Our populate drop-down list, we'll put that list of provinces as a select list in here, and we're just grabbing it out. I have my value at the top, all provinces, and away we go. Second one, same idea. Okay, it's our city label, right? And then we have city ID as the ID and the name, and it is getting data from the city ID select list, right? Okay, so that's good. Now, to make the filtering work, though, we do need to use some script, right? Now, there is not a script section here yet, but all we have to do is add a script section, right? It doesn't have anything in it yet, but this will then, when in the layout page, when it looks for any script sections, sections called script, then it will actually process this and include it in the output. So I'm going to copy and paste it right as I have it in the copy paste file. But remember, I initially was planning on doing this demo inside the doctor's controller. So right now this won't work because that's the URL I'm trying to pass the request to is doctors, but it's no longer, it's home in this case. That's where I've put all my code. Okay, so now it should work. Now, look familiar? Yes, we've done this exact kind of JavaScript before when we did our refresh dropdown list, right? We made that as more or less a generic function we could call or method to call, and we could call that whenever we wanted to have a little modal pop-up, create a new record, and actually have it show up when we refresh a dropdown list, right? So it's very much the same kind of an idea. What we're going to do is grab that province ID, select control, grab its change event, okay, and we go and we get the value, the currently selected value, store that here in selected province, okay, and we get a reference to the actual one we want to refresh, our city ID, our city drop-down list. We empty it out, okay, we build the URL the way we need to, so it'll call the home controller the get cities method, and it'll actually also add on the ID of the selected province. Right, so we just do our get JSON call, okay, to the URL. We get our data back as long as we actually have data. and we loop through it, building an option where we put the value to the item's value and the text to the item's text. So that just builds the data in the drop-down list again. Of course, very important, we had to empty it first, or we would just be adding it on after the data that was already there. Okay, now I've done an else branch here. We didn't do that last time because we didn't worry about having no data, but we are filtering. So what if we, ask for, in our case, a province where there are no cities in the system yet, right? Now, obviously there are cities in every province, but might not have them all in our database yet. So the else here is if we get no data returned from our action in the controller. Well, in that case, we've already emptied it, so I'm just going to append simple value text combination null and no cities in that province, right? Just so we have something to show there to let them know what happened. Okay, so that's as simple I think we can do this demo. Let me actually run it. Bada bing, bada boom, bada bing, bada bing, bada boom. I think I need another coffee. What do you think? I think a coffee would be really good for me right now. Look at it. If I come right down to the bottom, here's the link for privacy. Yay, there we go. So we see, oh, I'm missing data. Oh, I did something wrong. I'll have to just quickly check here. Hang on a second. Of course, I missed a step. In fact, I'm so shocked that I actually had to, only because I did a test run earlier and there was something cached. All right, so here's my action result, and I never call Populate drop-down lists, right? So I shouldn't have had anything in either one, but it was only because there was still something in the cache of the browser. Okay, so let me come back up here. All we're missing is a call to Populate drop-down lists. Silly me. There we go. Obviously, when we first, ask for the home controller, and the privacy action, we have to call populate drop-down list. So let's try that once more. Once more into the breach we go. And I'll click privacy. Oh, see, I set a breakpoint to make sure, but of course we're going to be fine. All right, there we go. So there's all my provinces and all my cities. Now, right now, of course, they're all together, right? Every province. But if I select, let's go Alberta. Now, see, there's only one. I only have one city in Alberta. British Columbia, I think I only have one. Ontario, I know there's a few, right? So I got 4 different ones here in Ontario. You just notice if I pick a province where I know I don't have any cities yet, there I'm getting that little artificially added name value pair, no cities in that province, right? Just to let me know, okay? I can go back to all provinces and I get the full last list back again. So there you go. Simple example. Now, if I wanted to carry on and add more and more, maybe I'd have streets, okay, in the cities and who knows what after that. But, I could just keep on repeating the process, take the value from the last one, grab its change event, use it to go get new data for the next one, and so on down, right? So that is really all there is to it, with one exception. Uh, I do want to take this demo a little further, and we'll talk about that in a moment. Okay? Okay, just before I stop this recording, let me point out at the bottom of my copy paste file. Now, I know I changed it. I did it in a different page, so, doctors and so on, but this would work exactly the same if I put it in the doctors create page as I'd planned. All right, but there's 2 issues outstanding. As we noticed, our script looks an awful lot like that refresh drop-down list script that we created earlier, right? And what I think is worthwhile doing is revisiting that and saying, you know what, if I'm going to be using this kind of code all over the place, why shouldn't I try to centralize that, make it more reusable, my original function? And that's exactly what we're going to do before we go on further. But then we want to actually tie in, right? This, as I said, it's independent. It has nothing to do with any of the model classes in our medical office. So we'll actually go through the process of tying it in. That's why I was going to do it in Doctor, because we'll eventually do that. With the idea is that we want to track the province and city where the doctor was initially issued their medical license. I don't know why I had to come up with something. Okay, so that's what is outstanding that we're going to do. So let me just carry on then in the next video.